I moved to Jeddah about 13 years ago. I'd been married already about 10 years. And when I came here, I had that, maybe you could call it like the typical American Muslim woman's attitude towards Ramadan and Ramadan prep, which was basically like, okay, we got to keep it simple because I have to focus and I have to make my ibadah. So, no frills, no extra stuff. We hear, I used to hear, I remember as a young woman, don't make these elaborate menus, and you don't have to do all the fried food, and you should keep it as simple as possible. This is a time for ibadah. In a sense, that's correct. I mean, if we're sort of going overboard and just making lots and lots of really elaborate and unhealthy things in Ramadan, there's something strange and off about that, I suppose. But my attitude honestly really began to change when I came here, especially because of my experience of being in Ramadan in Medina. So, if any of you have ever been in Medina, Al-Munawwara, during Ramadan, you'll see thousands and thousands of people, mashallah, tabarakallah. You'll see row after row of the sufra, or the dastarkhan, what they call, like, essentially the spread for each row of people, each row of fasting people. They'll like spread out these plastic sheets, white sheets, and people are sitting across the entire length of it. And then they begin to distribute the food, and each person gets a little thing of yogurt and some bread and dates, of course, and some water or zamzam. And they also get, often in Medina, they give this thing called dugga madani, which is basically like a Medina version of chaat masala. It's a little seasoning packet that you can put into your yogurt and eat the bread and the yogurt with that seasoning, and just to flavor your meal. And often each sufra, or each spread, is hosted by a single family or a single group of people, and they take great pride in making and having like thermoses of hot gahwa, of hot Arabic coffee, ready to serve. And then often, if they're able, they'll have their own special kinds of dates and their special kinds of extra things that are allowed by the authorities in the haram, where you'll have not just the haram approved meal, you might get some extra stuff like the really nice, fancy, expensive dates, and even more gahwa than everybody else. You might get the ginger gahwa, and you might get other kinds of things. So, and I would watch this year after year of people serving with such sincerity and such hard work. And then my husband, he would tell me about someone they knew when he was growing up. He grew up here in Jeddah and would frequent the Haramayn a lot with his family. And they knew of someone they called Sufi Sahib. Sufi Sahib was in Medina. And he was part of a tariqah, which basically their way consisted of feeding people. Like their way of going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the main kind of extra ibadah that they did was feeding people. And so he would have this like warehouse in Medina, and people would come and drop off 20 kilo bags, 50 kilo bags of rice, uncooked rice, raw, or flour, or onions, or potatoes, or whatever. And they would, Saudi men who were wealthy and they had money, they would come and give money, or they would come and give food stuff. Trucks would pull up and they would just unload all this food for his warehouse. And he had this system, very organized system, where he would cook and distribute the food, and people would come. I think he was originally from the Punjab, and people who were part of his tariqah, they would come and do khidmah. They would come and give service to him, to his work, to his own service, by committing they'd come from their hometowns in Pakistan, and they would come for a whole month or come for 2 months, and they would just cook with Sufi Sahib. And they would distribute food to the hajis, to the people who came for Umrah, to poor people, cooked food. And this was his thing. This was what he did. When I heard about these stories, I realized there's really something special to feeding fasting people and to feeding people in general. And, but I think for some time I still had this, I began to appreciate it when it was done in the haram and when it was done for lots and lots of people. But it took me a while, honestly, to understand that same beauty and that same self-sacrifice and high level of service is also being displayed in so many homes individually, particularly by the women of our ummah, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say feeding the fasting person on a huge spread of 1,000 people is what will get you reward with Allah. right? I mean, that's not the hadith. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is the one who feeds a fasting person has the like of his reward without decreasing from the fasting person's own reward, right? Like you get, if you feed somebody who's fasting, you get the same amount of a reward that he did for his fast. And there's another hadith, subhanAllah, where the Prophet ﷺ told us, the one who feeds a fasting person or outfits a soldier for battle, he has counted for him the like of their reward. I mean, it's like, the Prophet ﷺ put together the person who is feeding a fasting person and the person who is preparing a righteous soldier going out for a righteous battle. It's subhanAllah, right? SubhanAllah, if you think about the implications of that, the implications of what does it mean that a person who is feeding a fasting person is like the person making jihad. It's really something else. And so, I mean, now that I've been around different kinds of people and I've been seeing women who wholeheartedly serve their families. Not that I wasn't around it when I was younger, but I think I just didn't see it in the same light. I really appreciate it. I mean, I think I've come to really see the immense beauty and the power of the service that individual women are doing all of the time. And the only reason I think we don't already appreciate this, like why don't we naturally, automatically appreciate the work of the woman? One of the reasons is, I think it's just because it's so everyday, right? If it's just an everyday task, as human beings, we have a tendency to see tediousness as mundane, as, as not really something powerful. So it's just the boringness of the thing, I think, and the routineness of it. But there's also the factor that, a lot of us, or those of us who have been raised in the West, or who have a Western kind of a training, we think of service as something really great when it's done out of your own will. I wasn't forced, I'm just expected to be a wife and cook out and feed all these people and my children and my parents-in-law, and I never get a break, right? So, but if I do it of my own accord, then there's this autonomous kind of ability to choose that the modern Western person really appreciates. And then there's the other thing of just how Western people in general, or the liberal mindset, I should say, in general, has a recognition for what occurs in the public in a way that it does not appreciate the private sphere. What happens within your home, within the domestic sphere, is not as consequential and is not as important as what happens in the public sphere. And I think, for us as both women and men, for us to think about making, to move away, to try and move away from that mindset, and to think about how can we make the work that we do in Ramadan, of taking care of our families, of going every day to work, every single day you wake up, make your suhoor and then get up early, drive all the way to work all day, come home, and you're exhausted and you're really tired, you barely can take a nap, you have to see if your kids need something, help with your homework or whatever it is, and then you have to then you have your iftar, and then you have to run to the masjid, and you're doing your 20 rak'ah of tarawih, and then you come back, and then you go to sleep for a couple of hours, and then it's back to the same thing, right? Like, the man who gets up and makes a super high intention of, I am going to work every day so that I can feed my family and I can bring home the food that is needed for these fasting people to break their fast. I mean, what is among the other many hundreds of niyas that a man could make for the hard work that he does in Ramadan. And then the women who, generally it tends to be the women who are preparing the food, who are directly helping the fasting person break their fast, right? The tremendousness of that action is there as long as she has the niyat for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She makes that niyyah and it becomes something sublime, it becomes something tremendous, it becomes something great. And I hope, inshallah, to keep that notion and to keep that direction and intention in mind, and I urge those with me to do the same, because it really puts a completely different light on the effort that we put in to make things for our family. There's another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that applies, which is, the most beloved people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those who are most beneficial to people, and the most beloved deed to Allah is to make a Muslim happy, or remove one of his troubles, or forgive his debt, or feed his hunger. And this hadith, I mean, if you think about it within the context of women who have to cook and do a lot of work to serve their families during Ramadan, in a time when they're hoping for the forgiveness of Allah and hoping for being saved from the hellfire, just like everyone else is, that she's making by making the foods that her children like and then her husband likes. You know, I have a friend of mine, she has 5 children, she has her parents-in-law living with her, elderly people, she has herself and her husband to feed, and she does it with a smile. I mean, the woman is super organized. She preps from, weeks before Ramadan, so she doesn't have to waste too much time in she doesn't waste any time, really. The garlic ginger paste is already ready. The samosas are already made and frozen. She has like this like system that she has going within her house. It's not as big of an outfit as Sufi Sahib's langar in Medina, but she's definitely having a spread that she has to put out every single evening of Ramadan. And she has the preparation there, she has the organization there. But I think more than that, I imagine, and I'm sure this is the case, because this is the only way I could see her. How does she still have a smile on her face? And how does she still get in her taraweehs? And how does she still get in her khatam of the Quran? It's only because I'm sure she has a really pure and high intention in what she's doing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And things just flow and go towards her being able to fulfill both her ibadah as well as bringing joy to the hearts of these people and taking care of their need by feeding them in the month of Ramadan.